Ladies and gentlemen of the crypto space, we're live on a Monday, August 7th at 2:16 p.m. A little late in the day, a little busy. But we're getting some content out. PayPal releasing their stablecoin, whatever that thing is, ancient code on Ethereum mainnet. It's interesting. Is it exciting? Not yet. So the most important thing maybe to start out the stream is expectations. What are the expectations for today? What are the expectations for a week from now, a month from now, a year from now? Too shorter time frame of expectations are the prevailing problem with persons allocating capital, especially in crypto markets because of the volatility. The longer time frame is much more interesting to consider, and trying to mute the noise, to get the bullshit out of the way, to peer through the insanity and the madness. Nothing's going to happen today because of PayPal stablecoin launch. Nothing significant is going to happen today because of some sort of isolated price action, or something's going to go asymmetrical in a negative sum game in a decreasing macro liquidity environment. Not today. It's not today that matters. Today, don't waste your time thinking too much about today. But what does today tell us about where things are heading? That's why we look at directionality. That's why we look at the puzzle pieces, the causality of things. The fact that PayPal launches a stablecoin, what does that mean? Oh shit! Dollar liabilities are kind of important. Title of the stream is Building a Better Liabilities Machine. Everything in crypto markets up until now, I consider testnet. It's been an experiment. 2020 wasn't a market. It was degenerate speculation on something that folks didn't understand. Even 2021, 2022, obviously, the air came out of the degenerate speculation. But as expected, things survived. And that's why it's distinct from the period of 18 and 19 and earlier. But look, we're already looking back 5 years of history. The market in 2022 showed us, first and foremost, the macroeconomic tools and utilities that are being built in crypto markets, not the degenerate pool 2 APYs of hyperinflationary effects. Showed us recycling, sterilization, and stability that can emerge from these cyclical pressures that induce capital flows, not just across assets within a particular market, but even across markets. The stickiness in the overall DeFi market, obviously capital drained out, negative sum, but the stickiness in the DeFi market is exactly what creates the inflows as the cycle turns. These cycles, how long do they take? As many other macroeconomists have talked about, these cycles appear in 3 to 5 year time frames. Now, bear in mind, aside from macroeconomists talking about 3 to 5 year time frames, what have we seen with things in the crypto markets? They've been about 3 to 5 year time frames. And the Bitcoin halving is a 4 year, very cyclical periodic time frame, precisely cyclical. But that 3 to 5 year time frame has manifested itself in macroeconomic capital flows from a liquidity perspective, as Mike Howell and Raoul Pal talk about. And that those are forward-looking indicators. So it's critical to assess or distinguish between, forward-looking indicators and lagging indicators. So our forward-looking indicators That tells us where we're heading. In what time frame? Not today, not a week from today. That's too much volatility in such a short time frame. But in a month, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 2025. So what have we assessed? We've assessed overall directionality. We've assessed that it's going to improve. Liquidity conditions will improve. Over the longer time frame, we've assessed that there's going to be significant volatility in the short time frame. So that is an earlier expectation as compared to a more appreciative market. Volatility does not indicate an issue with directionality until there's effective confluence that something systemic is changing. And that can occur. But overall, we know where we're heading, and there's going to be a shitload of volatility along the way. We also know the products, the real financial tools and products that are available in crypto markets that did not exist in 18 and 19 and earlier years. These products are not inherent to what actors see from a Bitcoin perspective, the whole value storage narrative, the whole, well, maybe I see better now the use of, or at least what Satoshi intended with P2P electronic cash. So that's another story. But the utilities and tools being created in crypto markets are not exactly what we've seen in previous market cycles. They're a manifestation of things such as FX and credit. And liability is a result of credit being extended. And we've learned that the entire global financial system runs on credit and runs on these liabilities. And these liabilities are literally equivalent to dollars in the global banking system. So what has yet to emerge as something interesting is collateral swaps. For instance, what's going on with Tether and USDC, it'd be interesting if they had a collateral swap mechanism, if that would aid their businesses in being able to manage their pegs much more effectively. The collateral swap would also have to swap the liabilities. So if Tether had a capacity to swap collateral over to Circle, the liability would also shift from a USDT to a USDC. And obviously, there's other components like burn fees and mint fees and other pressures that affect why individual actors will swap from one currency denomination to another. But the tools and utilities are still not there in crypto markets as compared to the robustness of what has historically existed in actual meat space financials. Why? Because meat space has been going on for a long time, decades upon decades. It'll take some time. I mean, look, it's been 3 years since this emerging market said, "Hi, I'm here." It's only been 3 years, and look how far we've come. We have full-fledged credit systems, full-fledged, liability printing regimes, economics with sterilization and currency recycling, and they've shown their resiliency aside from the complexities of vested interest. That is mutually exclusive in many regards. What matters is the cyclical flows that have been observed. Those cyclical flows tend to grow. They tend to attract capital and create stickiness because the flows create a yield. The yield attracts capital inflow. That capital inflow gets stuck in the cyclicality of the flows. And there's ways to capitalize, and there's multiple mechanisms for capitalizing on the cyclicality of these flows, as everyone knows, between the LSDs and the vote rental premiums. And as these flows increase in volume, all the fee extraction will increase as well, and the total total flow that's cyclical is going to inflate. It's going to grow. There's going to be more capital that's cycling. And sooner or later, like Tether and other large stablecoin issuers are going to realize that they need to manage liquidity. They need to manage their pegs. And to manage their pegs, they need to pay arbiters. Either they're going to be the centralized arbiter, which is complicated. And I mentioned earlier on Discord, that's a matter of insourcing or outsourcing. And obviously, outsourcing, that's exactly what vote rentals are. It's a means of outsourcing an incentive to arbiters and those contributing liquidity depth to these systems. And the persons that are the protocols that are accumulating vote a capacity to vote, voter escrow in one shape or form or another. Those are the ones that are insourcing that capacity to finance arbiters or manage it themselves. So those are the two paths that a new entrant to the liability space will have to consider. It's one or the other. Do you insource or do you outsource? How do you manage it off chain? It doesn't make any sense. You need a capacity to manage it on chain, so you need these types of understandings of these systems that have emerged. And it's not just what system, it's how to use them and why these systems have been working that matters. So these are the enterprises, these are the businesses that have emerged. You could literally define the entire crypto markets in a couple of businesses. And we've done that. It's like 3 or 4 businesses. That's it. But that's huge. And then what happens is you have saturation, competition, you have success and failure, and then it's the same phenomena that happens in meat space all over again. It's literally just monopolization, lindiness, what attracts capital, what survives and grows over time. Those are the things that are likely to survive into the future. Technology that exists for a longer period of time and is consumed in greater and greater amounts is more likely to continue exist into the future. So as that happens, that's exactly what happened with Bitcoin, and that's why it grows stronger and stronger as everything else comes online. It just further reinforces the historic narrative. The competition, the failures in the competition reinforce that Bitcoin narrative. And that's the same phenomena that happens with these downstream financial constructs. You'll have your competition, few competitors stick. Because unless the competitor quickly surpasses the precedents, the preceding implementation, then it's a matter of allocating from underperformance to outperformance. If the new competitor doesn't quickly step up to the plate and start to outperform, what has previously existed is going to be relatively outperforming. So they're like, all right, this new guy probably doesn't have it, and the capital just further concentrates into the status quo implementation. And this just happens over and over again as new competitors come online, new competitors don't gain traction, and that's why new isn't necessarily the best. That's why what already exists just gets bigger and bigger no matter something new and it's going to change everything. No, that already happened. That happened in 2020 where systems started to show the businesses that are possible. That was the new event. 2020 was like, 2008-9 with Apple and Android coming online. That was the new system, the new status quo showing itself of what can be done. So I don't necessarily see, there's not much opportunity with regard to new. So the bots are interesting. Like, I didn't expect Nolo to necessarily do what it did. That was a bit of a spec play from a YOLO perspective. But look, all of them are on Telegram. All the big bots are on Telegram. So where the hell is the Discord bot? And bam, there you go. So that's the NOLA narrative. It found a target market, an untapped opportunity. Do you think increase, liquidity or increase capital efficiency from an exchange perspective is like, oh shit, wow, it's going to change everything from an AMM perspective. So it's like, how many new AMMs could come online, automatic market makers exchanges, digital exchanges, and be like, oh, this is the best swap rate. Look at the robustness of the infrastructure between 1inch and Paraswap and Llama Swap, the Llama meta aggregator. I don't think there's much room for new in the exchange space. What'll happen is they'll come online and the opportunity is maybe short-lived, and then the capital just concentrates into the least risk position. And then the least risk is the one that has existed the longest. Everything changes when the liquidity cycle changes. So what happens is we're in a negative sum game, a decreasing liquidity environment, and that means, what does that mean? That means malinvestment has been cured. So what we're discussing right now is actual rational investment theses. All of this goes out the window when you have a positive sum game and capital inflows. You realize that, right? Then it just gets totally degenerate, and then any shit that hits the wall and sticks is going to just go parabolic and asymmetric. And that's when you're able to capitalize on actors that don't have this rational methodology. This methodology is most useful during the bear market. During the bull market, you got to left curve it. Oh, it's just throw the cash, grab your multiples, and you exit, and then you de-risk. De-risk to the systems that are still growing asymmetrically likely, but they're the entrenched systems, the status quo, because they will survive and grow along with anything new that comes along. So anything new, it's the old stuff is still expanding with regard to adoption and consumption. You can't surpass that. That's the phenomena of lindiness. Crypto Jake's in the house, Dan's in the house, Zero Flex G, what's up, Cap? Sir, Joe, present, Tim. Hey, Noah, what do you think of BitSensor? I don't know anything about it. James, hello, Cap. It's a birthday man in the house. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Spend some dollar liabilities tonight for dinner with the fam. You're going to spend some dollar liabilities at a restaurant. You're going to make a payment, and the company isn't going to know any difference. They're going to treat them as if they're dollars. And Gen Pop thinks they're paying with dollars, and literally it's just a liability transfer from either a credit card company or a debit card from a bank deposit from one account to another. It's literally a liability transfer. You're paying with I owe you dollars. When you realize how the system works, it's quite fascinating to actually believe that it actually works like that. One, and two, it's like, oh, is this going to stop working like that? And that's, in brief, that it's not going to change anytime soon. They need to keep this system running because otherwise you have post-apocalyptic scenario, and we've talked about those topics. Crypto Jake agreed with the exception of Hermes layer 0. Well, bear in mind, it's Arbitrum. And Optimism has what's going on with Velo. And look, interestingly enough, we'll see what happens with like Aura Balancer and versus Velo on Optimism. That because Velo has much more lendiness on the network. I'm curious to see what happens because all of this is we're watching markets mature and we're watching market dynamics play out. And markets are territorial. Systems stake their claim, define their territory, and try and defend it. Most of it's just proactive. It's a lot of consensus where the market actors define the topography of each respective market. They define what is Lindy, what is successful, and they do that by voting with how they spend their money. It's like the way Gen Pop talks about vote with your dollars. We're doing the same thing here. in many regards. And that's going to be interesting. So each of the what I call proto emerging markets, not even an emerging market because I define Ethereum as an emerging market, but the L2s, proto emerging markets. You know, it's interesting. You check back in 2 to 4 years after you get a liquidity cycle. You got to see how much liquidity flows in versus other chains to see which proto emerging market has the most capital stickiness. And then you got to see the flows between them as the seamless interoperability of liquidity further emerges. The layer zero in the CCIP narrative. So there's a lot to come. There's a lot of moving parts, and there's no certainty. And all there is a risk curve, a spectrum of risk of what may play out. Will you be less rational when print to go burr? Yes, you have to be. When print to go burr is when you take your cash, of which I denominate in a couple of different ways nowadays, and define in a couple of different ways, and that's when you deploy capital and you're able to, pretty much significantly capitalize. But that your core portfolio is still the rational deployment. And what you're doing is you're capitalizing on the irrationality of the market and accumulating either extra cash or extra position in the core rational portfolio. The rational component shouldn't really change of a portfolio. The whole goal is to build that rational portfolio such that you have a rock solid portfolio that's able to traverse the market cycles. The rock solid core rational portfolio is the one that lasts 10, 20, 30, 40 years. It's tied to the narrative of the entire market, the entire emerging market, and the enterprise offerings that it gives to the global financial community, and that makes it easy. That gives you a purpose. Your purpose is to speculate and capitalize during periods of irrationality to accumulate the shit that's going to last as long as possible, paying you as much as possible. So I hope that makes sense, and probably makes sense. Right, King? Lexorandify. PayPal issues a stablecoin. They will posit on Curve, won't they? How can they not? They need a liquidity financing plan. They need to facilitate a way of incentivizing arbiters and attracting capital to establish liquidity depth. Otherwise, maybe it's just a payment stablecoin, in which case it's like GUSD and no one's using it in the crypto markets like USDC or USDT. And a lot of dollar liabilities on crypto markets, the whole story is going to change over the next couple of years. Like there's native dollar liabilities to the crypto markets. That's what Frax is really building. That's what CRV-USD is, and that's what USD Zero and Tapioca is building, and that's what Go is, GHO. These are like very native liabilities using native collateral to print native liabilities, not liabilities in crypto markets that are created using collateral and meat space. So it's going to be very interesting. How do you not engage in the native systems to manage liquidity for your liabilities? So I don't see how they wouldn't have to do that. Where anyone, and that's just one, the countries are going to be doing that. They're going to have to. And the lindiness of the Ethereum mainnet, they're going to want to tap into it. Whether they build their own systems or not, it's irrelevant. There's an emerging market on Ethereum mainnet that's global in scale and scope. Direct to consumer, direct to corporate, globally, no intermediary. And they're going to want to tap into that irrespective of whatever network they spin up if they're not deploying directly to mainnet, which means they need that seamless cross-chain liquidity, CCIP, layer zero type stuff. So it's irrelevant if they make their own network. If they want to partake in the opportunity and the cash flow potential in these markets, they're going to have to engage with these markets as we've been engaging. They're going to have to learn the things we've learned and do the things we've done, because this is how you engage with these damn markets. You are one step ahead. You're more than one step ahead, all of you. listen to me, of many of the many large actors that make us look oh so small. I haven't looked into anything base, but the same narratives that I've been talking about pretty much in this entire stream apply. The liquidity has increased significantly. I move capital cross chain very sparsely. Um, as long as there's a layer zero bridge that has decent liquidity depth and you can move liabilities cross chain, you could play around. There's no reason not to play around and see what's being built, but it's the same thing, meaning there's going to be DEXs, AMMs, credit protocols, CDP protocols, and it's the same shit over and over again. That's all it is. Um, So maybe when new markets, new proto emerging markets come online, I'm more interested in which one of the core Lindy protocols is migrating over there. Is it more interesting for something new in a proto emerging market, or when something of the core protocols just expands? It's like when like if General Motors starts pitching cars in a new country or versus the local car companies. It's like which one has the weight, which one has the strength. So sometimes they pull out. We've seen that time and time again where large auto manufacturers pull out of a particular marginal market and the local manufacturers are too strong. And that happens. But my portfolio will remain structured around that type of story. Like a GM, it just goes to a new market. Where's the core liquidity providers, the core market makers, and AMM, so on and so forth, expanding to a new proto emerging market, which reduces the complexity of the equation. You don't have to run around like a chicken without a head. Albeit, bear in mind, it's a positive sum game likely on base. But we've seen, like when ARB came out on Arbitrum, that was a big positive sum game. It was 10% rips in total liquidity in that proto emerging market for a period of time. But that capital flowed out. What did it do? You see what it did? The capital flowed in. There was a lot of capitalization, a lot of capital gains to be had. The capital flowed out and retreated to the relative risk off. They retreated to the reduced risk portfolio structure. So that's, of course, what will happen with base. The greater the exuberance, the more capitalization, the more retreat, the more inflow, inevitably, the more outflow. But that outflow is going to be concentrated to the actors that capitalized. Hope that helps. So base is interesting. What I'm interested in most um, really is liabilities. I think I think folks will be surprised you know in the next liquidity cycle and maybe the one after, like between now and 2030, what happens to total liquidity, what happens to total volume, what happens to total cyclicality of flows, and how much transaction fees are really available. FX is the largest market on the planet, trillions cycle on a daily basis. I think the fees are going to be extraordinary, and I still don't see the full picture of where vote rentals come in, you know, because that's all internalized to the centralized market makers of the big banks and TradFi FX. I don't see necessarily the directionality of vote rentals. It's probably just cyclical and expands as protocol and liquidity is seen for what it's worth, and the protocol and liquidity is generating FX transaction fees, and those transaction fees are just recycled to manage and incentivize liquidity depth. So it probably just expands. Uh, Hopefully proportionally to total transaction fees that we are exposed to. Everybody's speculative. It's early, but we'll know more in a couple of years. Crypto Jake spent some dollar liabilities. I mean, is that not the case? You never had the dollars. You're not paying with cash. You're paying with dollar liabilities, and no one questioned it for a second. They just accepted it. What are your thoughts on the need for bribes? Would volume and fees on Uni be enough for a stablecoin? No, because it can't. Organic doesn't work. Organic relative to an incentivized regime, the organic doesn't. It can't work. This you have to think relative forces. The world, humanity works on incentive systems. They respond to incentives. So there's always going to be more attraction towards a system that's incentivized. That's why all the damn games on Apple and Android are the way they are. They're all incentivized, and they're giving away things, and they're the ad-driven. And if you play those like idle games and all those play-to-earn type games on Apple and Android, you see the cyclicality in the way advertising providers. What is an advertisement? They're paying an app to display an ad to drive capital inflow back in via purchases. This cyclicality that we see in crypto markets is just merely an extension of advertising. If you think about it, it's what an advertisement is. They're paying to incentivize persons to buy their products psychologically. It's because people are seeing it, therefore they're psychologically processing it, so on and so forth. But it's the same cyclicality involved there, driving the cyclicality of flows. Tapsy's in the house, always a pleasure. Um, that's the deal. Look at the dollar. I'm curious about the dollar. Mike Howe is seeing a bit of a dip in global liquidity conditions. Obviously, there's complexities what's going on in Japan and how they're managing their yield curve or the interest rates on their very, tightly controlled bond market. So I find his talks about he mentioned like his retweets about what's going on in Germany and their long end of the bond market. Everything he talks about is like, oh, that makes sense. So I appreciate uh, his story. I appreciate still Luke Groman's story, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating what's going to play out because right now all of these central banks are responding to extraordinary pressures to maintain stability, to manage volatility. All of this is in response to managing volatility, whether it's interest rate volatility, FX price point volatility, and they have done nothing to directly manage equity market volatility. That's been all indirect vis-a-vis the effects on overall liquidity as they're managing volatility. But that would be interesting if eventually at some point they do manage equity market volatility. Look at the circuit breakers. The whole point of that is to manage volatility. And from a government perspective, they need an actual existing equities market for the government to actually continue getting any tax revenue, significant tax revenue. So at some point, they're forced to manage volatility if it gets exacerbated enough. So once you realize that all of these markets around the world and all these regulators, their entire responsibility is the management of volatility, such that the system doesn't fly apart. Think of it as like a flywheel. If a flywheel gets a little bit off balance, it'll literally just tear itself apart. And that's what this overall global financial system is. And that's what these regulators do. They just manage it. It's spinning, 50,000 RPMs. If it gets off kilter a little bit, shit explodes. So they manage the volatility, keep it nice and stable, and then the cyclicality, the rotation of the flywheel keeps on going. Interesting that we chose that terminology in crypto markets, but it has a place in traditional macro as well. It has a place in physics and engineering as well. Flywheel. And what is the volatility of the flywheel, as we just discussed? Last couple questions. We'll wrap it up. It'll be quick today. Got to get back to work. This AM Kramer and CNBC praising stablecoins via PayPal. Not what we're about, but maybe inspire mainstream. Well, it's in the end the brand it doesn't mean much. What matters is the potential for flows, the potential for capital inflow. If people are storing their dollar liabilities in PayPal form, PayPal stablecoin form, that offers the potential to purchase new types of products. and make payments in new types of ways, and the potential to use systems that they couldn't do with just a standard PayPal account or a standard bank account. And people had to go through the frictions of FX, converting one liability to another, a bank deposit liability into a stablecoin liability. But now, if a PayPal deposit is in stablecoin liability form, that's interesting. So all of this has a potential to impact flows or potential flows, and that's our entire business. That's is the entire business of the crypto markets, is capitalizing on flows. That's one of the primary businesses. I think that's the biggest business of crypto markets, which is ultimately like balance of federation, curve federation, and the stuff that is speculatively interesting, the proto federation protocols from capitalizing on a transaction fee perspective, that type of enterprise, but also the credit markets. Look at what liquidity is doing. That's big stuff. But you have to inspect from an investment perspective, not just the enterprise significance, but is the enterprise crafted in such a way that there is an actual investment opportunity? The investment opportunity will usually manifest in price point. And look at the price point, look at the behavior of LQTY. At some point, it all goes parabolic when the liquidity flows in, and that's when everyone goes left curve, and it's just literally straight up. You can buy anything, and it's going to go up 50%, and then you capitalize, and you do that. You do that left curve way, and that's okay. We'll all be there. What we don't want to do is right curve it. We don't want to think about it too much. We want to keep things simple. We want to have a nice happy medium between mid curve and right curve, right on that downtrend in the bell. And that'll allow us to outperform the best we can. 23 people in the stream, 9 likes. Smack that thumbs up button. I appreciate it. We do the stream as religiously as possible. I'll probably be off Wednesday. I got to go to the office and do some meat space work, but I'll be back Friday. So you know the deal. Let's look at one other chart. Let's look how curve's doing. 60 cents. Look at this nice wick. Look at this. Let's go out to the daily. Where's the wick that I was looking at earlier? Was it on the monthly? No, not the monthly. I was looking on the weekly. Yeah, I was looking at this wick right through uh, the the TWAP on the weekly. So, nice and stable. But this is the expectation for this type of asset. I'm not going to digress too much at the end of the stream, but I don't expect the asymmetric appreciation with the currency recycling regimes, but I expect them to likely continue to produce cash flow into the future. And that's clearly what it's done. Look at the revenues of last week. Look at the revenues of this week. And is it surprising that everything has pretty much maintained? Uh, there was liquidity intervention, a relatively illiquid situation for this asset on mainnet, and that was cured by intervention. Everyone is always managing volatility. Doesn't matter whether it's a crypto market or a meat space market. You end up seeing the entire world through the lens of volatility and liquidity and risk with regard to portfolio composition and how you manage that with position size, and that's how you produce something that has longevity into the future, that hopefully produces cash flow into the future consistently and predictably. Thank you all for joining me. Tell everybody to subscribe, and after party on Discord. Link to Discord in the comments as always. I wish you all a good one. I'll see you at the end of the week. Peace.